Okay. Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, first, talking about myself, I'm usually pretty good at that. Uh, yeah, my name's Erik Lindholm, and yeah, I'm Swedish, obviously. I lived here for my entire life up until I went to Scranton the first time in 2009. I was 21 years at the time, and yeah, I was there for one semester. Then it was the spring semester in 2009. Um, yeah, and then I went back to Scranton a couple of years later in 2012, and then I stayed for a full academic year. Um, yeah, I remember that I was I the first time I went to Scranton, I was really worried the first day or so, or well, at least in the evening when I arrived to Scranton, because I had the misfortune of arriving at the night of I think it was the Super Bowl finale. So nobody from the university would come and meet me up at the bus stop first, even though they had like promised to do so. So they had to uh, find somebody who was completely uninterested in the Super Bowl finale to come pick me up. No, no. But they finally found an Indian exchange student who, yeah, who was completely uninterested in football, who could help me out, and I, I was, uh, I think there had been something wrong with my dormitory assignment or something, so they put me in a dorm which was. It was in Driscoll Hall, the top floor of it, that was being like renovated or something and hadn't been opened for students yet. So it was so lonely and quiet there. It felt like a mental institution or something. So that was, and I had been starving on the bus there because uh, I hadn't thought about I hadn't had time to eat on the bus station or anything like that. So yeah, it was a lot of mixed emotions when I arrived in Scranton. It was a great sensation of adventure, but it was also kind of scary and worrisome at the time. But when the morning came and I went down to the international office, uh, and they showed me around and all that, then it just felt so much better. I remember when I looked out the window the morning when I had when I awoke, and it looked so different when it was bright outside, and yeah, the street outside looked really nice in the morning, even though it was kind of a cold February day. Am I going into too much detail here, or okay? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Um, well, when did I start to feel at home? Um, those those first experiences that I had when I first came there in the evening and came um, to the dormitory, to Driscoll Hall, and all that. They were. I had gotten kind of a negative impression, and I mean, I hadn't been. I hadn't. I think I was kind of overwhelmed at the time by the realization that I would be away from my family and my friends back home for really long. So that particular night, I remember I was pretty worried, but I also felt it also felt good because yeah, because it was the sensation of being on an adventure that just yeah that I felt as well. But I think I had held on to those feelings that I just have to I just had to try to make it for the next 3.5 months or whatever it was. That I kind of went into survival mode, you know, during that evening, and so I think I was part of me was still feeling that for a while that yeah that I was I guess it was homesickness or so. But I remember when I came to when they finally the next day when they got it sorted out with my dormitories, and I went up to the house where I stayed for the rest of the semester, to the dormitory there, and yeah, I moved into the room there with my two roommates, and I remember that it felt really good at that time. It felt almost homely. So after like a week or two, when my both my roommates moved out at the same time, it had nothing to do with me. It wasn't that I was a bad roommate or anything. I should add, they had just made other plans, which kind of sucked because I felt we had a really good thing going. It was a great sense of communion and all, but yeah. But I remember. I think I was I think I was starting to feel pretty much at home by then because I had gotten so uh, I felt that I had met so many nice people, and I had such a big oh, what's it called? Well, I had so many friends and so many people I knew everywhere. I felt like I had never gotten to know so many people in so many different under in so many different situations so fast. It reminded me of being back in high school when I had when I felt that I was really part of a big communion because I had so many friends everywhere from my childhood and all because yeah because I knew so many people everywhere, and I was kind of I was very surprised that I would feel that in Scranton, where I had, after having spent like 2 or 3 weeks there, that I had so many friends there. Uh, so I think that was really contributing to feeling at home, and I think because I mean now when I think back of it, and when I thought back of it afterwards, I thought of Scranton as like my second hometown. I had really a really strong emotional connection to Scranton and the university after leaving, particularly. Yeah, 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 yeah. But I'm not sure if I felt completely at home after like 2 or 3 weeks. But you know, it was like I had gotten so much into the routine that it felt um, yeah, it felt like it was like it was my place. It was, yeah, the room that I was living in by myself at the time, where that it was yeah, it was my place, and I was really starting to adapt there. I think something that made me kind of nervous from the beginning as well was that my English skills, my speaking skills when I first arrived wasn't. Uh, I felt that they wasn't as good as I had thought they would be. That I couldn't find the right words, and I didn't quite know how to express myself. Yeah. Well, I'm. Excuse me if it sounds like I'm bragging now, but I think I would say that I had a very good proficiency level in English before I came there the first time. Mostly because I had played so many text-heavy RPG video games as a kid that I had been like at the top of my of my class in English for, yeah, all the way through school, more or less. And I had that constant practice of yeah, reading the text in video games. So I think that was the main thing. But I mean, in general, in Sweden, we do a lot of we consummate a lot of American and American culture and culture in English. So Swedes in general are yeah, I think we're considered to be really good in English compared to many other non uh, many other countries where English is not the main language. And I think that was part of the reason why I was so shocked that my speaking skills wasn't as good as I had thought they would be when I first arrived. Because I had thought I hadn't even thought that would be a problem to me. But at the time, I felt very frustrated that I couldn't communicate as well as I felt that I could in Swedish. But that was only for the like first 2 weeks or so. The English came so natural then after a while, and I think the vocabulary that I got from the from the video gaming that I could really I really had use of it later on. No, no, understood everything perfectly well. Yeah, yeah, that was one part of it, I guess. But I don't think I had that much problems with understanding. I think I had it was more the problem was more with that I felt that I couldn't express myself as well as I was used to. Yeah, yeah, that's what I felt. What do you say? Was I gonna say something about how it was in comparison to the second time around as well? Yeah, yeah. Um, well, it was. At first it was so weird to finally be back in Scranton again because I had such an amazing experience the first time I was there. It was so good. So during the time that I had been away from Scranton, it kind of started to become like this fantasy land to me in my head or something where it's I remembered it so vividly and it's so when I came back there, I could barely believe that I was back again. So I think I had so much more expectations when I was going there the second time, and also adapting to the culture and the language, that I felt like that happened pretty much immediately at that time. Mostly also because there were some of my old friends from Scranton were still there. Like the guys who came to pick me up from the bus station. This was in the summer, in the late summer, so there wasn't any Super Bowl finale at the time. So they were some of my old friends from back then. It was the same guy actually who was one of the first people who I'd gotten to know first time there. Now that I think of it. Anyway, so all of that contributed to that. I very much just fell into the same routines and the same mentality, and yeah, I felt like there was my old place there, my old role in the community, or whatever you should say, was just there, and it was just, yeah. Yeah, 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 I know. It's like yeah, but it's the same thing. You're, I think you're doing the same exact same thing here in Scandinavia. Yeah, when we saw each other in Copenhagen in November, the worst month of year, and you're like, oh, this is so cool. Yeah, 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 exactly. But that's exactly how I'm feeling about Scranton as well. Yeah, the general culture. It's yeah, it was very welcoming. I think it was kind of a difference as well between the two times when I went there, was that the second time I still felt very welcomed, but I also didn't feel at times I felt like I didn't uh, well um, at times I could feel like I was a little bit more of the odd man out, so to say. Which I think the main reason could have been that I was older at that time. I was older than, I was 25 at the time, so I was older than almost all of my friends in Scranton. Um, but yeah, so and that gave me a different outlook, I think, on on everything, on the whole situation, and I had changed a lot in the time in between. But it was still a great experience the second time too. It was just yeah, it was different from first time. You mean the first time? Um, I think I should say the academic life, because the social life, it just um, everything just happened, and it was so just going so smoothly and everything. And I didn't feel that it was that I had any problems with the academic transition neither, actually, because I think you know, one of the main differences between um, the higher education in Sweden compared to the US is that in Sweden you study like you study one course over like one over a month for 1.5 months or so, and then you start the next one, and then you only study that, and then you start the next one and only study that. So you get like the same amount of courses over a semester as you do in the US, but you just study one of them at a time. You don't have a schedule like in the US, and I was so happy to have that schedule again because I didn't like I don't like that the Swedish way of studying like that. Um, but you know, back in high school in Sweden, it was more similar to how it had been back then, and yeah, it felt more similar to that with the schedule and everything, and uh, and I had been I had been missing that kind of studying a lot. So I think I adapted very well to it because of that, because I could really see the positive aspects of that, which I think that if you're really into the Swedish uh, the the Swedish way of doing it, reading one course at a time, I think you maybe could find that hard uh, to do it the American way, because it's uh, I don't know if you would have to structure your studies differently or so. But I think one of the main benefits with that kind of studying is that you get much more, you get to connect with so many more people socially, because you meet so many people from the different courses uh, just during and who you keep connecting with over the entire semester. So I think socially there is a great difference to uh, it's much more beneficial with the American way of studying like that. So yeah, sorry for I know I just keep talking, going on and on, but yeah, you'll have to do some cutting later. Yeah, you're gonna have a lot of raw material from me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I suppose really short holiday trips doesn't count, or do they? Yeah, well, I've been to Denmark and Finland, and that's like if you're a Scandinavian, it's very common that you go to the neighboring countries, and very culturally similar to Sweden. So it's didn't feel like that's big of a thing. Um, I don't know. One of my parents was knocking at the door, but it doesn't seem like it's nothing. Um, well, um, yeah, I think what made Scranton really special was that it was the first time when I was going abroad where I was really gonna get to experience the culture. You know, because since I had been to Tenerife, the Canary Islands, and to Paris when I was a kid on trips with my family. But I think that was it. That was the farthest abroad that I had gone. Uh, Now after Scranton, I went to South Korea, to Seoul, and lived there for well, it was almost 2 months, I think, um, and it was a year, exactly a year later, in 2010. And I think that's what's, apart from the US, that's the cultural experience that I've had that's definitely left the biggest impression on me. Um, but it was, yeah. That's where I've been, and also I've been on. I'm a, like a hobby adventurer, so I've gone on long distance bike trips as well to Norway, and yeah, I went from my hometown in Sweden to Oslo 2 years ago, which took me like it took me 3 weeks to go back there and to go to Norway and back, and then I've also gone to throughout Europe, from Sweden down through Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, and Spain to Gibraltar, where I went there this summer on my bike, that is. And it's really hard to compare those experiences to my exchange studies, because it's it's actually, I think it's actually, you get to experience the culture more when you get to make long-term relationships like you do during exchange studies. Um, but both are great ways to experience foreign countries, and it's two very different kinds of adventure, I think, and I can't really. Um, I can't really say that one is better than the other, because at times I really miss the feeling of yeah, of a long distance bike trips when I could be close to nature, and I would meet people occasionally and talk to them and get to know them a little, but then just go on. And compared to being exchange studies, where you're part of a much bigger communion, and you make so many friends, and yeah, you make relationships that really have time to develop much more. I like both of it. I love both of it. Even I want to go on exchange studies again. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, exactly. Um, yeah. Um, I don't know. Um, I I try to recall something which I can't really recall anything which I could call a big culture shock in the US, because, like I said, we consummate so much American culture that we have this image of the US and what it's like, which I guess in some parts of it, sometimes we tend to think we know the US much better than we do as Swedes, because of that. And sometimes the images we get are actually kind of accurate. So I mean, I did know a lot about American habits, I think, and American lifestyle before going there the first time. I think I was a little surprised that there was so many things like brand names and stuff like that that I didn't know about, or that I had heard about on some occasion, but never uh, quite memorized or so. But yeah, but that I suddenly remember when I came back to the US. Um, I feel like I'm giving a really weird answer, but it was just, I mean, it was so little of a culture shock, really, because Sweden and the US is similar in so many ways. I think the biggest cultural difference, of course, which is maybe a really vague answer, is that the Swedish mentality has been very shaped uh, by social democracy and the influence that it has had on Swedish politics and the Swedish mentality for the past century. Um, so I think you could really notice differences in mentality that are a consequence of the political differences. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's I've heard about exchange studies that's gone to the south that's had a really major culture shock and felt that they, I mean, Swedish exchange students that's felt that they didn't fit in at all and that they would, yeah, that they would feel isolated and stuff like that. So I think I think it's Scranton just happened to be an area which was uh, had a pretty similar mindset. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, my education experience. Yeah, I really don't think anything could have been better the first time around, at least, because it was such an amazing experience. It's like the best time of my life when I think back of it. Still, um, so I mean, even even stupid things like not being picked up at the bus station. Those are memories that I hold really fond. I wouldn't want that to be changed either. Um, I just think it's very hard to to be objective. You know, I feel like I'm very subjective when I think about it. But it's hard to say that because I wouldn't want to change anything. Uh, I think the other time around, I think maybe uh, I don't know. Maybe if I had been a little bit younger, maybe I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. If I because but I think that was more in my head that I constantly felt like the big brother of everybody, you know. So yeah, but and also I think I don't know. I think maybe people in general seemed a little bit more like they would be more able to share my perspective of Scranton. I feel like the first time around, people was more appreciative of it and could see all the good sides of it, you know. Well, the second time around, a lot of people like shared this mentality that you're expressing that people had a bad attitude and stuff. And I guess I met more negativity at the second time around, or so, than I did the first time. So yeah, yeah, no, no, not at all. It worked out perfectly. I think maybe um, maybe I had um, the studying was tougher than it was in Sweden. It was the demands were higher, I think, and you had to spend more time studying, and that was a little bit. I shouldn't say that it was a bit of a shock the first time, but um, it was a little bit frustrating. The next time, I think. Um, yeah, I remember that I spent so much time studying then because but I think that was maybe because I wasn't. Um, yeah, forget it. I don't know where I was going with with that. But it was just the studying was really tough at the time. But I still like studying in the US better than studying in Sweden, even though it's a little tougher. It's worth it for the yeah the doing it with the American way with the schedule and everything, and that it's a little more social. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's okay.